Rose Marie Coleman with stampingwithrose.com. Today I have a fun video to share with you featuring this scrapbook layout that I did this month, in the month of June 2019 with my scrapbook club. And in particular, I want to show you how I created this starburst background on this page. So let's get started. I'm going to show you the strips and the measurements and how I did this. So let's get started here. Okay, what do we need? To do the starburst technique like I did on my page, you're going to need 5 different pieces of paper, designer series paper, whatever you want to use. I chose to use 3 pieces of designer series paper and 2 pieces of cardstock for my background. I find this particularly a good technique to use if you have busy paper. So these patterns are quite busy, quite involved, and a little piece will go a long way. So you can use up your scrap paper. The measurements for these strips are 3 inches wide by 9.5 inches long. So that's 3 inches wide by 9.5 inches, and you're going to need 5 different sheets of coordinating colors. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take all of your sheets and you're going to cut them on the diagonal into the paper trimmer. So I'm just going to bring in my paper cutter and I'm going to just open up the arm here. I'm going to line up the corner of one corner with the opposite corner in the track and then gently close down on the foot and then cut so you get 2 triangles like this. So I'm just going to quickly do all of these here. Just bear with me while I cut all of them on the diagonal. Just like so. And the paper that I'm using is from the new designer series paper from the catalog. As you can tell, here's my package. I've cut into it quite a bit. And this one is called Follow Your Art Designer Series Paper. Beautiful, beautiful designs featuring all kinds of artistic paintbrushes and ribbons and all kinds of stuff that would be appealing to anybody who's in art. Look at the scissors on this one, and there's like stitching on this one. So not just for stampers or seamstresses, it could be for anyone artistic with an artistic flair. This page, I was actually thinking I would put pictures from my daughter's artwork because it's June, so she has a lot of artwork that she's been doing this year. So I'll take pictures of those pieces and put them on this scrapbook page. Okay, last piece here. And now I've got all of my strips. So you're going to have 10 of these wedges. So what I want to do now is the cardstock pieces. I think it would be fun to emboss them. So I'm going to pull in my die cut machine, my Big Shot, and I'm going to use the new button embossing folder. And as you can tell from the picture, the screen, look how many buttons and different things and stitches, and I just love this folder. So we're just going to quickly emboss these. Now the embossing folder measures 5 by 7, and I know my strips are bigger, but that's okay. You can still fit them in, and it doesn't matter that this piece hangs out because we're going to cover it up on the layout. So I'm just going to pop this into my die cut machine and I'm going to roll it through. So I'm going to go ahead and do all 4 of these same way. Look at that embossed image. I just love it. Okay, so just moving on with these now. More. Takes a little bit of time to run them through the Big Shot, but it's worth it. It's totally worth it. I love the texture and the dimension that it'll add to the page. Oops. More. Takes a little bit of time to run them through the Big Shot, but it's worth it. It's totally worth it. I love the texture and the dimension that it'll add to the page. Oops. Okay, there we go. So I've got all my pieces embossed, 2 of the Pacific Point and 2 of the Calypso Coral. And I'm going to mention with the die cut machine, I also used a brand new Stampin' Cut dies. These are called Sweet Silhouettes, and here's what they look like. These are gorgeous. Look at the big tree that you get and the dandelion and the word inspire, forever, and adventure. So I went ahead and I cut out the word inspire with Pacific Point cardstock, and that's the word I'm going to use on my page. So I'm just going to set that aside. So instead of having you watch me cut that, I just wanted to explain where I got that from. Okay, so now we're ready to assemble our layout. So what I have here is a piece of scrap cardstock, Whisper White, and it measures 11 inches by 6 3/4. And what you want to do is you're going to just take a ruler and you're going to measure that halfway point at 5.5 inches. And then you're just going to draw a line. And if you have grid paper, you can use grid paper as a guide to make sure your line is straight. So a pencil line in the middle of this piece of Whisper White. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to bring in my snail adhesive and I'm going to cover pretty much all of this with snail. I want to get quite a bit of glue on here because I'm going to be gluing down all those wedges. So lots of lines. You can use whatever glue you have. You can use Tombow glue or tear tape, but I think snail will be just fine for this project. Okay, then what you want to do is bring all those wedges back in, and we're going to create the starburst now. So maybe on the top of your project here, before you stick it down, you can just lay down your pieces and just see how you would like them. So I think I would like the pens, and then how about some Calypso Coral, and then you can do this pattern. So I'd rather do it like this, like have a visual, and then I can just pull in my piece and stick all the pieces down. Now I want to show you that one of your pieces, when you cut it, you're going to have, because we cut it on an angle, one of your pieces, the wedge is going to be sideways, but that's okay. I'm going to use this one at the bottom, and you're really not going to notice that those spools of ribbon are sideways, because it's just going to be kind of at the bottom. Okay, so up at the top here, I'm going to put, next to that, I think I should go with Pacific Point. And we need another pattern paper. I'll put that one here. And a Calypso Coral. And let's finish this pattern with some more of this one. And lastly, the pens. Okay, so that's my pattern that I want to use on my glued piece. So now I'm just going to pick them up, and I'm going to bring in my piece. I'm going to line them up, the straight edge with the straight edge of this pencil line. Just like so. And then I'm just going to go around like in a clockwise fashion and stick all my patterns down the way I had organized them. And they're all going to stick off the edge, but that's okay, because we're going to trim that in a second. And at the bottom, you will have a tiny little bit of an edge down here sticking out. That's okay. I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that in just a second. And then I've got my Pacific Point piece. I'm going to put I love this pattern piece. It has bows, it has buttons, it has threads. It's just so wonderful. And as always, the Stampin' Up! Colors always coordinate. The colors that are in the designer series paper, they list them in the catalog, so you can always find out what colors you can use to make your layout match. Everything should coordinate. So there's my Starburst. Now it's quite big, of course, so we're going to take this and we're going to flip it over, and we're just going to trim around. And I have some long scissors. Now, if you have a guillotine style paper cutter, you could pop it in there and trim it pretty fast, but this goes pretty slick here with a pair of scissors. Just going to trim that all the way around. And if you wanted to keep these pieces, there are pattern pieces and they're designer series, embossed pieces. You could keep the scraps and punch out the button shapes with circle punches if you wanted to. There's a lot of really cute buttons still with no adhesive on them, so you can put those in your little scrap box and use all these pieces for another project. Okay, let's push that out of the side and let's take a look at our Starburst. So here's our Starburst on the cardstock. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to have a couple little wedges down here that need to be covered up. So using the It Starts With Art bundle, I pulled in the framelets and I used this one. It looks like a string of buttons. So I cut 2 of those in Coastal Cabana right here. So I'm just going to put this aside for a second and bring in I have a little silicone mat. Now these come, I believe it's 6 by 6, but I just cut them in half into quarters or into thirds when I have classes, and then I can distribute them. And my class attendees can have a little piece of the silicone. So that's why mine looks a bit smaller. So I'm going to use some Tombow glue, and with Tombow glue, it is super, super sticky, so a little bit goes a long way. So I'm literally just putting little dots all along the edge here of both of these strips. And then I can go ahead and stick this down on my project like that. Okay, so let's put this onto the project. So I'm just going to pick up one and put it right on this edge here, and that'll do a good job of covering up this little gap. You could trim it if you wanted to as well, but I really think these buttons, the string of buttons, really adds to the page. It's like a nice little accent. Okay, so there's my Starburst with the buttons stuck down. Now to finish off this side of the page, what I did is, where my pieces, I have cardstock pieces. They're here somewhere. Because I'm going to put my Inspire on. Let me just, I think I left them in the other room. Just give me 1 second, I'll be right back. Okay. You guys hear my daughter and her friends singing? I don't think they heard me when I told them I was going to be doing this video. They're upstairs singing. It's all good. Here I have a piece of Pacific Point, and I'll give you the measurements. It measures 5.5 by 3.5, and I have a smaller piece of Whisper White that measures 5.25 by 3.25. So I'm just going to put my layout aside for a second, and I'm going to bring in that Inspire, and I'm going to add some Tombow glue to it. Just a tiny bit. I'm so impressed with Tombow glue and how long a tube, a little jar or tube, whatever you want to call it, lasts. It lasts a long time. So it's great value for your money, and honestly, I have never had anything fall apart that I've made with Tombow glue. So good value there too. Okay, so what else am I gonna do? I'm just gonna let that dry for a second and then I'll stick it down. You can let Tombow glue just chill for a minute and it's not so sticky. I find it's not so goopy when you go to pick it up to put it on your project. So I'm just gonna stamp on the Whisper White. I'm gonna use a couple of the fun buttons from the It Starts With Art stamp set. There's all these different images in the stamp set. So I'm just using the bigger button and the smaller one. And I also have a blender pen. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring in my Pacific Point ink, and I'm going to stamp the bigger button in the corner. And before it has a chance to dry, I'm going to use the blender pen to just pull some of that color. So the classic ink, you can use it to color if you're using this blender pen. So a blender pen has no color in it, but it will pick up color. You can dip into your ink pad and use it, and when you're done, you can just work the color. So I'll just show you. When you dip into the ink pad, it now becomes like a blue marker until you work it off, and then you can go into a different color. So there's my blue button, and I'm just gonna close my ink pad, and I'm gonna bring in my Calypso Coral ink, and I'm gonna stamp a button with Calypso Coral up here. And while it's still wet, I'm going to do the same thing with the blender pen. Just kind of blend that color in, and it just adds a nice little splash of color to the button. And I want to do a third color. I'm featuring the colors that were listed for the designer series paper. So Stampin' Up! Makes it so easy for us to recreate or create our own images. We can recreate things that we see in the catalog, or we can do our own things using the colors that they've listed. So there I've stamped the small button again. Now this time I've used Coastal Cabana. Just going to bring my blender pen in and blend that color around and work it off on my scrap paper. And now I'm ready to go ahead and put the little Inspire down. So I'm just going to put that right in the center. Now this die does cut out the little tiny dots for the eye, but they are super, super small, you guys. Oh my goodness, they're so small. So I didn't have patience to like pick those little tiny things up. And plus, it's always better to add bling to your project. So what I've done is I've got my rhinestones here. I've got my Night of Navy blend, and I'm just going to color a couple of little rhinestones. A couple of them fell off. I'm just going to color them right onto my sticker sheet, onto the rhinestone sheet, just to tie in. It's not Pacific Point, but it's very close. Night of Navy, it'll work. So now I'm going to pick these rhinestones up and use them on, whoops, there we go. So I'm going to put them, they're going to be the dots for my eye. Need one there and one over here. There we go. So there's the Inspire. Now we can go ahead now and put that onto my Pacific Point layer using some snail. There we go. And the last little thing I want to do is to bring in my dimensionals. Now, I didn't bring in the background piece. So what I have here is a piece of 12 by 12 basic gray, and I've layered a large piece of Whisper White that measures 11.5 by 11.5. And I don't have those with me right here, but what I'm going to do is put this on as soon as I go off camera. So I'm just going to bring this piece in. I'm going to add a couple of dimensionals at the top, just to stick it down and show you how basically this layout is finished. I just have to put it onto the background piece. So I'll put a couple of dimensionals up here. I'll actually put all 4 on, but I'll only pull off the top 2 ones until I get my other background pieces ready. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this down. So this piece here is actually going to cover up these wedges that do not have the embossing on the tips of them. So that's why we don't need to worry that our embossing folder is just a little bit smaller than the wedge, but that's okay, because this is how the Starburst looks. So I hope you like my Starburst tutorial this afternoon, and I hope you'll come back and join me for some more YouTube videos. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.